Hey there guys, and welcome back. So we are on session 13, and first thing you will notice is that I may have ran over by quite a bit on both of my 1-hour sessions. And the first one, alright, so the explanation on the first one is basically that I felt like I was going really slow with my coding. I felt like I was just, not coding as quickly as I normally did, and I was like, alright, I'm going to give it an extra 10-ish minutes, just to get some more work in. So that's the explanation on the first one. Really, I think it was less me coding slow and more just the process of debugging, Debugging takes time. You got to run through stuff and spot and check. You're not in the same place, the same piece of code or the same two windows, let's say, all the time. You're jumping around from place to place, so it just takes time. So probably not just me, probably just the fact that it was a matter of debugging. Just takes a little bit longer. The second hour, honestly, all this extra time, this extra 29 minutes, that one, I think I probably could have avoided. Basically, I started doing the shop, and when I started doing the shop, I decided to rearrange a bit of the code, which then broke the demo, which had been working perfectly beforehand. And at that point, that's what kind of cost me the extra 29 minutes, and I was not going to start this stream without a functional demo. So that being said, we'll go ahead, and I probably shouldn't have minimized that because you're now on the blue screen of death. Alright, here we go. We'll hop into the demo so you can see it working. So, this you're all familiar with. Down here, I think it was here. The sectors portion, I believe, was here last time, but now we are 100%, and you'll also notice up here scrap. So that's the other thing to notice. These sectors, these two sectors here, require scrap to upgrade right now, so I had to pre-populate it with some scrap because there is no other way to get scrap other than scout bots right now. So we have just leveled up the scout bots with our 20 scrap and 10 of the batteries we had. We'll go ahead and level up the residential sector as well. You can see the scout bots turns to collect because this is an activated ability. The residential sector, however, just keeps on taking over because that's a triggered one. That, like houses in a dark room, just constantly checks for new characters and adds them as they come in. So as we're running through here, you'll see eventually we'll start getting some new characters. It looks like I'm low rolling right now is what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the... Yeah, okay. I just pulled up the inspect tool just to make sure the console didn't have an error because it is a little weird that I haven't... There we go. There's new characters. So yeah, we just really low rolled on that one pretty hard. Normally, when I've been running through the demo, I've gotten to 9 characters rather, pretty quickly, but as you can see, everything's working. We're actually low rolling on scrap too. It's a 50-50 shot to get scrap because we have 2 items on tier 1, scrap and provisions, and it's one of those things, it's 50-50, so as you can see, we've only hit once so far. It is a random number, but that 3 popped up on the 1 roll. So one of these things, I'm going to keep on hitting this button until we hit 24. I am thinking about putting in, changing up, alright, let's be serious. This game is absolutely not in any way balanced at the moment. As you can see, I've got 195 batteries, which is probably way more than I should have. And just one of those matters of there are the resources and how the game plays out really needs to be balanced at some point, but that is not at all important right now. So, what I probably should have done for the demo is just up the amount of scrap you get from the scout bots by a significant amount. But as you can see, we can go ahead and just keep on leveling up the residential sector since we have so many batteries. And, okay, actually that was a good thing for me to point out. You see how batteries is blinking right now? That's the other thing we added. That was, I mentioned we'd be adding that. So we don't have enough resources. The residential sector right now required 42 batteries. We didn't have that at the time. I click it again. We now have it, and we're now maxed out. As you can see, fully expanded, level 10, and we're good. And you can see we're getting all sorts of characters now. So, one of those things. We just got everybody on grow food right now, for the most part. Way more people than we actually need. But it's either that or charge batteries, and we have no uses for batteries right now, so that's why I didn't bother switching them over previously. I'm just trying to get to, actually, I was trying to get to 24 scrap just so that I can level up the scout bots, but, okay, yeah, there goes 2. So we are now on level 2 scout bots, and I believe we were at 0 before, so yeah, so that's 5 there. So you can see that now we're getting more scrap than normal because we're level 2. And 10 scrap, yeah, 10 scrap is good enough for the powered farm. Still gaining characters because 10 times 4 is 40. And add the extra 5, I believe is the base number. Yeah, 5 is the base number. So that would bring us up to 45. So we have room for 45 characters, and over time we'll end up with 45 meeples gathering stuff. And yeah, honestly, this is actually the sum total of the demo so far. Again, it's just basically to demonstrate A, meeples, B, the difference between sectors, and the fact that, you know, obviously these 2 sectors can go up to level 10. This sector is capped at level 1. So we're demonstrating all the functionality of the game so far, at least in terms of this. Obviously, we have a very simplified version of combat. We don't actually have character interaction in the combat yet, but that's largely because that's pretty much unnecessary, or that was pretty much unnecessary in my opinion. It's one of those things, you'd probably just do the same thing over and over and over again in combat. You just attack, and then heal when you get to half-life. So I didn't feel the need, unlike this one, to implement a full UI. However, with this one, we are implementing a full UI because you need to see how everything's working, how the timers work. We have different timers. For example, this automated farm has 10,000, seconds as opposed to 5,000, which is an interesting note. And yeah, all right. So I feel like I've beat this horse to death. So let's go ahead and hop over to VS Code and talk about the changes. And I will pull GitHub back up for myself and start going through it. So first major change is I finally pulled the trigger and moved utils. There we are. Moved timer over to utils. Very minor this is event listener. Sorry. There we go. Timer. Very minor change right here, just in terms of now. I had to rename because the now function is now part of this same module. So I was having variable name conflict there, which was causing issues. Actually took me longer than I am happy to admit to figure that one out. I was sitting there, I was like, it's JavaScript. I don't actually know, could be some weird JavaScript thing. And then finally I went, oh, wait a second, it's a name conflict. So yeah, it felt a little silly for taking 5 minutes instead of 5 seconds to figure that one out. But I'm just scrolling really quick to see if there's anything else, because again, GitHub will not tell me what else has changed in here for timer. However, it does tell me that there is another very, very important thing over here that I realized was wrong and was not an issue up until the point we started doing unlocks. And that is, where is events? Let's see, what line number is this? 166? 166. Event type dot description. Symbols, I've been doing toString. That's actually I didn't realize, because again, I hardly ever need to do, this is actually the first time I'm using symbols in JavaScript, and I didn't actually know that toString is a basic method that all objects have in order to basically, quote unquote, output to console in a way. So when I was calling toString earlier, it didn't necessarily matter that we, oh, I forgot to push this to origin. 1 second. All right, I just pushed it to GitHub origin. Sorry. Should have done that when I committed. Anyway, toString just basically gives you the full class and name string, and that didn't matter because everything was just referencing the same thing, so it was cool. But when I started doing prerequisites for unlocks and stuff like that, when I put that into the JSON file, I was not doing symbol open quote or open parentheses engineering, let's say, close parentheses, and therefore it wasn't matching because it was just engineering the string. And that should have worked, but it wasn't because that the symbol's name, quote unquote, is actually dot description. Again, that's something I didn't realize because JavaScript, not super familiar with it. I will, let's see, is there anything in the items other than my shop update? Nope. So we'll skip over that for a second. I'm going to skip over some other stuff in terms of unlocks just because that all happened when I did the shop update. So yeah, various bug fixes. I don't think I'm going to touch on all the bug fixes just because they're pretty simple. I guess this one's kind of important. Over here in colony.js, let's go to line 400-ish. It's actually a little bit above there, but before I wasn't checking that the sector was above level 0. Okay? Which meant that we were actually running the timer on the sectors. Well, there were two things. One, we were running this timer on the sector, and we were checking the sector even before we unlocked it on the demo, which looked a bit silly. It wasn't actually doing anything because it did not actually have any levels to trigger, but it looked a bit silly. So I put this in here so we just ignore any sector that doesn't have a level. In theory, if you have a sector, if you unlocked a sector through the game, it should have a level, but you know, just on the off chance that doesn't happen in gameplay, then we've got that. I also forgot this sector.timer.update cycles, which was a little bit silly. Again, we got up here, update timers right here for Meeple. Forgot to do it for sectors. Again, just a little silly mistake. And then along the lines of timer, because I touched on it, down here in sectors, now we had, again, I monkey patched this before, but this is a more elegant fix to it with the timers. Again, sectors, as you'll recall if you watched the last video, sectors were, the way we're initializing them, the timer was not being created because it didn't have access to the colony, and therefore we couldn't really do anything with it. Now, when we level it up, when it levels up, it should have access to the colony, and therefore we can create a new timer. Or actually, I think I got that wrong. Let's see. Let me look at new timer really quick. Now this, oh, that's right. It didn't have this dot collection time set correctly. That was the problem. But when we call new timer when we level up, that's an easier way of setting new timer. Point being, so a couple, let's see. Oh, here was the other, this is another kind of funny random mistake on my end that was causing funny interactions in the demo. So I'll bring it up because it's a bug. So again, I wasn't going to, but because it was causing a funny interaction, I'll mention it. Sector.timer.clear ready. So actually we had the sector constantly activating, or constantly being ready rather. So you could constantly just spam collect scrap off the scout bots because I wasn't clearing the ready. Again, just a very minor bug, but it had a funny result, therefore I'm bringing it up. So let's move on. Yeah, we will come back to this in a minute, but for now, that is all the changes in Colony that I want to touch on. Over in the callbacks, I think we have that open. Yep. So I modified this table a bit, added in the scrap collection. That's what number 2, resource number 2 is. So added in the scrap collection. Also did this +1 because the reward level starts at level 1. We don't actually start at level 0. We start at level 1. So it needed +1. And we added in the agriculture callback, which is very simple right now. I don't know if I'm going to ever make this ever going to make this different. It seems like a reasonable, well, it really depends, I guess, when it enters into the game. So right now, as you can see, it's basically providing food support for the entire residential sector, which is pretty powerful. It frees up all your meeples with the exception of about 4 or about 5 of them, or I take back 2.5 of them. So, right, you have your 5 that are not supported by this that come stock with the colony. And out of those, because hunger is twice as long as gathering food, you only actually need 2.5 of them on gather food in order to make up for those 5. So anyway, if frees up labor for all the meeples, that seems pretty good to me, but it really depends on how, how the rest of the economy irons out. So for example, in the dark room, we had serious issues where it took so long to, I believe, either tan hides or cure meat. I can't remember which. And that became a serious bottleneck. So it didn't matter that I had a plethora of miners, or not miners. Well, yes, miners. I did need the miners, but a plethora of workers doing something else important. I forget what it was. It didn't matter that I had so many of them doing that other thing, because the bottleneck was at the tanners, and the tanners resource conversion rate was just so abysmal. So it's one of those deals where even freeing up everybody using this agriculture callback, this agriculture sector, this automated farm, even doing that may not be game breaking, but chances are we're going to just leave that for later on in the game anyway. So it ends up being more like an end game reward. That's probably what's going to happen. Next up, let's see, how much in the colony demo do I really need to go over? I had the blinking, so I mentioned the animate, and I showed you how the animate was working on the HTML on the demo, right? One of those things, I have never used that before, and I had it written slightly wrong before. One of those things, check the Git if you want to see what the difference was, but basically I had the keyframes laid out incorrectly. Again, had never used it before, I just learned about it, so no big deal, just a minor change. And looking at the rest of these changes here in demo, it looks like it's largely just minor things. Okay, I did have to. That's actually reasonably significant. Where is colony demo? There we go. And this is 237. However, it's also going to be a little bit higher. So actually, we're close to 237 anyway. So when I added the residential update feature to add meeple, you can see how this does not say add meeple. This says add meeple to GUI. So if we hop over to there, you can see what I ended up doing is I had to split this into 2 functions, because the add meeple here actually calls add meeple on the colony, which we don't need if the residential sector is adding the meeple by itself. So in order to keep my code, not duplicate code, which was the whole entire point in the first place of having the add meeple function, in order to not duplicate, we had to split off the actual GUI adding from the normal adding that's used to populate the initial set and used with the add meeple button down here at the bottom somewhere. Add meeple right there. So we had to split that up. That was a pretty significant change. It was easy, but it was a significant change, so I'm mentioning it. And yeah, I think the rest of it is pretty straightforward changes. So now we can talk about the shop update. So let's start over in items.json. So here in items.json, as you can see, everything has shop prerequisites and shop costs. You can see this one has shop prerequisites undefined. That means you cannot buy it in the shop. So that's the signal I'm using to say, do not show this in the shop. Otherwise, the assumption is, even if it's an empty list, that it will show up in the shop. So hopping over to items.js, I added another class, which is shop item. And we hit F12. There we go. So this is just a superclass basically that takes shop prerequisites and shop costs and stores them. And therefore we can go ahead and just check if shop prerequisites is undefined. And if it's not, then it is something we can buy in the shop. That's over in colony.js. This gets added to all the basic types, which is useful because, for example, the item, right, is stackable. It has the stackable type. So I didn't have to create an intermediary class because the item type right here is a shop item and the item itself is stackable. So I didn't have to put an in-between class that allows us to combine both shop item and stackable, which was a nice benefit of how we laid out this, how we laid out our code originally. Same thing with resource here. As you can see, the resource type is a shop item, but the resource itself is stackable. So again, just a very convenient consequence of how we ended up designing that in the first place. And over here in Colony, the changes that ended up breaking everything, and I spent the extra 20 minutes fixing right here. So because I started duplicating all this code, so to buy something, first off, to check if it's in the shop, you need to make sure you have the prerequisites. So I needed this code again, which I already had twice in the body of the Colony before. So it's one of those things where I've 3 times, and therefore it made sense to just take this and bring it out. This code, again, you should be familiar with because we've seen it in a number of places, and it's just convert the unlock to a symbol if it's not already one, and then make sure it's inside of our unlocks. This function in particular is returning the modified so that we always know that we have a symbol at the end of the day and whether or not it is one that we have unlocked. Check unlocks is basically then the code that would go around that, and this is in 2 different parts just to make my life easier and to make it a little bit because this part right here is used in a couple other places without the rest of this. So the point being is that it got split up in order to actually be useful. Otherwise, this again is code that you basically should be recognized. You should recognize rather. You should be recognized. Good. So no unlocks. Again, we create a list of things that we do not have unlocked, and then after we get through this function, anything that's not validated, not result, gets put into that list. When we return to this, the function then calling this then goes and calls trigger event no unlocks. Again, that's how you're familiar with it. And finally, when we go to pay for items, again, we've done this in a number of places for paying for upgrades, for collecting for meeples. We've done these things because the meeples have required their jobs rather have required resources. So this code again was code that was available all throughout the rest of the code body, but makes more sense to make a single function and just call that instead of copy pasting the same code over and over again, because that's bad. So don't need to explain it. You should be familiar with it at this point because I've been over it a number of times before. So that now brings us down to the shop items and purchase items. So in shop items, we go through all the things in game.items. So game has the items object, which has items, armor, weapons, transports, resources, etc. I say etc., but that's literally the exhaustive list right now. So etc. is actually inappropriately used there. Sue me. Again, as I mentioned when we were talking about it, if it's undefined, and honestly, I should change this also to Control-Z, Control-Y. I should also change this to type of, just in case we get something that's not an actual shop item. So this undefined string will come straight out of JSON right now. We're not converting it to the undefined object right now. But if we end up getting an item that is not actually one of those and therefore will not have the string, then we should also do undefined like this. So that's a quick fix. I'm going to get rid of this console.log while I'm here. There we go. This code, actually, back to the weirdest part is I could have swore, oh, okay, I changed it down here in purchase items. I forgot to come back up here to shop items and change it. That's what happened. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, I should be able to change this code, right? Yeah. There we go. So, this dot check unlocks item dot shop prereqs. There we go. And that would be unlocked equals. Yeah, it's one of those things. This name is actually a little backwards here, which is why it's got the not here, but dot length. There we go. All right, on the fly. Again, I was rushing to try to get this done in time. It is now fixed. And we will move on. So anyway, if the item is unlocked, then put it on the list. Easy enough, return the list. And then down here, purchase item, I started filling out. We need to actually go through and to do add to colony or player character. Otherwise, the rest of this is easily understandable because I already explained it all. Check the unlocks, check the cost, and next we will deduct the cost and give it to either the colony if it's a resource or the player if it's a equipment item, or a transport. The transport is not actually classified as an equipment item, I don't believe. Actually, let me double check that. I may be wrong about that. Character, equipment. Nope, I take it back. And actually, back to the character does have resources on them, but because we're purchasing the item from in town, that just goes directly into the colony's resources. These resources that are on the character are only there when he's out of town traveling or away from the base traveling. So, let me check the GitHub one final time because I believe we are done with the updates. And we will do our outro if that is the case. Let's see. Boo. Yep. Talked about shop items. Talked about the timer run utility. Alright, yep. That is everything in the GitHub. So, the colony demo, 99.999% complete. Just got to throw a list on there of items to buy and finish up the actual purchasing of them over here. And similarly, what's probably going to happen here, let's see, go down to purchase items. What's probably going to happen here is that I'm actually probably going to end up adding in a remove resources, just because as you can see I have this add resource here because I kept on adding resources, but now that we're actually paying for something else, then we may need this as well. Actually, the funny thing is that we probably don't need this, although basically down here, because we already checked cost, we already know it's in our resources. If it wasn't in our resources, then we wouldn't get this far. So actually, yeah, I probably won't, I take it back. I probably won't add a remove resource function in that case, because there's no practical reason for it. The practical reason for add resource is because you actually need to initialize the array index before you plus add compound operator, whatever you want to call it, the resource quantity to it. So that's the reason that it has a little bit of extra code, which kind of justifies the add resource portion of it, it being its own function rather. But with removing resources, we already have the check cost thing, which already validates the fact that we have the resources, and therefore we don't need to do any additional checks. We can just take the resources out. So for that reason, we will not be doing that function, and therefore all we got to do is, again, add it to the appropriate place depending on what the resource is, and after that, come over here to colony demo, wherever that is at, there we go, and add the front end for it. Add the HTML and hook up the buttons to buy stuff. And at that point, we will be done with the colony demo. As far as I'm aware, that should be 100% everything, which means that we then move on to the map demo. So, yep. That, I believe, is the plan. So, I don't think I have anything else to say. So, as always, thank you for watching if you have been. And I have. I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world. And I will catch you next time.